Middle-aged Cowboy thought he'd die alone. One wild night with Apache women changed everything. Jack Dusty McCall had spent most of his life under the wide, endless sky of the western plains. The sun rose and fell over the golden fields, painting the land in shades of fire and gold, and Jack's eyes had grown used to seeing the horizon stretch farther than any person could imagine. He was a man of the land, born and raised on a ranch that had been in his family for generations. Horses, cattle, and the rhythm of nature were his only constant companions, and he liked it that way, or at least he told himself he did. Jack was a man in his late 40s, with a weathered face lined by years of sun, wind, and hard work. His hands were calloused and strong from roping cattle and mending fences, and his boots carried the dust of countless trails. Most days he went about his chores quietly, tending the animals, repairing broken gates, and riding the land from sunrise to sunset. There was a satisfaction in routine, a peace in solitude, but behind the steady rhythm of his life, there was a quiet, gnawing loneliness that he could not ignore. The people in town had grown used to seeing Jack pass by on his horse, tipping his hat politely, but rarely stopping to chat. He was known as a reliable hand and a man who could handle anything on the ranch, but he had no family to visit, no children calling his name, and no close friends who shared his quiet evenings. Most of the old neighbors who had once been his companions had moved on, seeking lives in towns, railroads, or cities far from the open plains. Jack's days were filled with work, yes, but at night, when the wind whispered through the canyons and the stars appeared like diamonds scattered across the sky, he often felt the sharp sting of being alone. Jack remembered the life he had imagined for himself when he was younger. He had pictured a house filled with laughter, with a woman by his side and children running barefoot across the yard. He had dreamed of riding together through the open fields, of sitting by a fire in the evenings, sharing stories and plans for the future. But life had a way of taking different turns. He had loved once a woman with eyes as bright as the morning sun, but the relationship ended when circumstances pulled them apart. Since then, Jack had thrown himself into his work, convincing himself that solitude was his choice, that he didn't need anyone else. Still, there were nights when the quiet became almost unbearable. He would sit on the porch of his small, weathered cabin, a cup of coffee in hand, listening to the crickets and the wind rustling through the sagebrush. Shadows of the past would drift across his mind, and he would feel a hollow ache, as if something essential was missing from his life. He tried to drown the feeling in work, riding long distances, repairing fences, or caring for the cattle, but the loneliness was persistent. It had become a silent companion, always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for the moments when Jack's mind was still. Even the routines that once brought him comfort sometimes reminded him of what he lacked. The smell of hay, the warmth of the sun on his back, and the rhythmic sound of horses' hooves had been the backdrop of a life he cherished, but without companionship those moments felt incomplete. He would sometimes watch families passing through town, seeing fathers teaching sons how to rope, or mothers laughing with their children, and a quiet pang would strike him. He knew he had been missing out on those experiences, the very things he had dreamed of in his youth. Despite the loneliness, Jack had built a life that suited him in many ways. The land was his sanctuary, a place where he could be free, where no one would judge him for being quiet or for living life on his own terms. He had a few books, a small radio that brought distant voices into his cabin, and the companionship of the ranch animals. Horses nuzzled him affectionately, cows recognized his voice, and even the old dog that followed him faithfully around the ranch seemed to understand his moods. These were simple comforts, but they were not enough to fill the space left by human connection. Jack often reflected on the irony of his situation. He had always prided himself on independence, on being able to handle whatever life threw at him. He had survived harsh winters, droughts, and cattle drives that tested even the strongest men. Yet despite his resilience, he could not escape the emptiness that settled into his nights. He sometimes wondered if this was how he was meant to live, a solitary cowboy moving through life like a shadow across the plains, admired for his strength but untouched by the warmth of shared human experience. As the seasons changed, the isolation felt more pronounced. Winter brought biting winds and heavy snow, forcing Jack to spend even more time inside his cabin, staring into the fire for hours. Spring brought the busy work of planting and tending the land, but even in the midst of activity, he felt the persistent absence of someone to share the moments with. Jack began to think that perhaps this was his fate, to live a life of work and solitude, never experiencing the kind of closeness and love that he had once imagined. Even in the town nearby, where neighbors waved politely but moved quickly past him, Jack felt a disconnect. Conversations were brief, and friendships never lingered. He had tried, in the past, to open himself to companionship, but the effort seemed to fade when life became busy or when people moved away. Over time, he had learned to rely on himself, to accept that being alone was simpler than risking disappointment or heartbreak. Yet, deep down, a part of Jack still hoped. He could not completely extinguish the desire for connection, for laughter and shared stories. He noticed small moments that reminded him of what he was missing. A child's laughter in the distance, the smell of bread baking in someone else's home, or the warmth of a neighbor stopping by for a quick chat. These fleeting moments stirred memories of what life could be, what it once had the potential to offer him. Jack's life was a delicate balance between comfort and longing. He had the freedom to live as he pleased, to work the land, and to wander the open plains. But freedom without connection carried a weight that pressed on his heart in quiet, persistent ways. He often questioned whether he had made the right choices, whether his stubborn independence had cost him more than he realized. The life he had built was strong, durable, and respectable, yet it lacked the warmth and spontaneity that only human companionship could provide. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery reds and deep oranges, Jack rode out to check his cattle. The wind brushed against his face, and the familiar scent of sage and dust filled his senses. For a moment he felt the thrill of life in its purest form. The wind, the land, the animals, yet even in this moment of contentment, the shadow of solitude lingered. He realized that no amount of work or routine could completely fill the quiet ache inside him. Jack Dusty McCall, the middle-aged cowboy with a life built on resilience, independence, and routine, was a man of strength and skill, yet haunted by the quiet pain of being alone. He had learned to survive, to thrive, in the harsh landscape of the West, but he had not learned to escape the loneliness that followed him like a shadow. His story was one of contrasts: freedom and isolation, strength and longing, routine and the yearning for something more. Little did Jack know, his life was on the verge of an unexpected turn. The horizon he had always watched so closely would soon bring him an encounter that would challenge his solitude, awaken a spark in his heart, and remind him that life, even at his age, still held surprises that could change everything. Jack Dusty McCall had spent decades living a quiet, solitary life, yet the wide plains still held surprises. One late afternoon, as he rode along the edge of a canyon to check on a small herd of cattle grazing near a stream, he noticed movement that made him pause. At first he thought it might be a coyote or a wild animal, but as he drew closer he realized it was something, or rather, someone, he had never expected to see, a small group of Apache women traveling together through the rugged landscape. Jack's first instinct was caution. He had heard stories over the years, tales of travelers encountering strangers in the wild who could be dangerous or unpredictable. His life had taught him to trust his instincts and to keep his distance when he wasn't sure. Still, there was something about these women that made him hesitate. They were laughing softly among themselves, carrying bundles on their backs, their hair shining in the late afternoon sun. They moved with a grace and confidence that was striking even in the harsh environment of the plains. Jack dismounted from his horse and let the animal graze nearby, keeping a careful distance. He watched them for a while, unsure whether to approach or ride away. Something in their energy called to him, a warmth and friendliness that he had not felt in years. He reminded himself to be cautious, but curiosity, and something deeper, pushed him forward. Slowly he stepped closer, his hands resting lightly on the reins, making sure not to startle them. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of caution. Their eyes were bright and welcoming, and their laughter soft and melodic, eased some of the tension Jack had felt. One of them, slightly older than the others, stepped forward. "Hello, stranger," she said. "We are traveling through these lands." "Are you a local rancher?" Jack nodded, tipping his hat. "Yes, I'm Dusty. I tend to the cattle around this canyon. Name's Jack McCall. And you are?" The woman smiled warmly. "I am Ayana, and these are my companions. We are traveling together for a while. We mean no harm, just passing through." Something in Ayana's voice was soothing. It was calm, confident, yet gentle. Jack relaxed slightly, though he remained watchful. Over the next few moments he exchanged small talk with the group. They spoke of the land, of the trails they had crossed, and of the distance yet to travel. Jack noticed how they moved together with a natural harmony, sharing responsibilities and laughter as they went. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Jack found himself fascinated by their stories. They spoke of the mountains they had climbed, the rivers they had crossed, and the small towns where they had rested. Their voices carried excitement and curiosity, and Jack realized he had not felt that kind of liveliness in years. He had spent so much time in solitude, thinking he was content with routine, but watching them, listening to their laughter, he felt something awaken inside him, a spark of joy, a reminder that life still held surprises. At first he kept a polite distance, standing beside his horse and observing them. But as the conversation continued, Ayana and her companions invited him to sit near their campfire. It was small, simple, and already lit, casting a warm glow on the surrounding rocks. Jack hesitated. He had never joined travelers at their fire before. It felt intimate, a step into a world he had avoided for years. Yet something in him wanted to accept the invitation, to step out of his self-imposed isolation for just one night. "Come, Jack," Ayana said with a gentle smile. "You are welcome here. Rest a while. Share stories with us." He nodded slowly, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. As he approached the fire, the smell of smoke and herbs reached him, earthy and comforting. The women had prepared a small meal, simple but nourishing, and they offered him a plate. Jack hesitated, feeling the awkwardness of socializing after so many years alone, but he accepted. As he tasted the food, he realized how long it had been since he had shared a meal with others, really shared, not just eaten in silence at his cabin. The conversation flowed naturally after that. Jack found himself laughing at their jokes, answering questions about his life, and even sharing stories of the ranch, the cattle, and the vast lands he cared for. The women listened intently, asking questions that made him think in ways he hadn't considered in years. There was no judgment, no expectation, just genuine interest and warmth. As night fell, the sky transformed into a canvas of stars. Jack looked up and felt a sense of awe he hadn't felt since he was a boy. The vastness of the plains, the sparkle of the stars, and the soft warmth of the fire made him realize how isolated he had truly been. The women shared stories of their own experiences, tales of adventure, family, and traditions passed down through generations. Jack listened, captivated, feeling as though he were part of something larger than himself, something alive and vibrant. It was in those moments around the fire that Jack began to understand the power of connection. He had spent so many years believing he was fine on his own, that solitude was enough, but the simple act of sharing stories, laughter, and food with others reminded him of what he had been missing. He realized that life did not have to be lonely, that even in middle age, unexpected friendships and experiences could awaken joy. The women noticed his quiet awe and included him in small activities, such as helping prepare the fire or passing food. Jack felt useful and appreciated, something he had not felt in a long time outside of his work with cattle. Their presence was comforting, and their energy uplifting. Each of them had a story, a perspective, and a way of seeing the world that was different from his own. Being with them opened his eyes to the beauty of diversity, the richness of shared experiences, and the importance of listening and learning from others. At one point, as the fire crackled and shadows danced across the rocks, Ayana spoke softly to Jack. "You have lived a hard life, Jack, but it seems your heart is ready for more than work and solitude. Life has a way of giving surprises when we least expect them." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had never considered that he could still find joy and companionship at this stage of his life. The thought was both thrilling and frightening. He had been alone for so long that opening himself to connection felt like stepping into unknown territory. But for the first time in years, he felt hope stirring in his chest. Hours passed as the night deepened. Jack listened to the women sing softly, their voices carrying over the canyon like whispers of the past and present intertwined. He told them stories of his youth, the challenges he had faced on the ranch, and the quiet triumphs that had marked his days. For the first time in decades, he did not feel lonely. He felt part of something, a shared moment of warmth, laughter, and humanity. When the fire burned low, the woman invited him to rest nearby, and Jack accepted. Sitting under the vast sky, with stars stretching endlessly above, he felt a calm he had not known in years. The night had brought him more than companionship. It had reminded him of life's unpredictability, its beauty, and the small wonders that could be found even in places he had walked 1,000 times. As he lay on a bedroll beside the fire, Jack realized that this chance encounter was changing him. He had come across the women expecting nothing, prepared to continue his lonely routines, but instead he had found laughter, friendship, and a gentle reminder that life could still surprise him. He closed his eyes, feeling gratitude for the moment and a quiet excitement for whatever might come next. Jack McCall, the middle-aged cowboy who thought he was destined for solitude, had discovered a spark he had not felt in years, a spark of connection, curiosity, and possibility. The night was young, and the world suddenly felt larger, richer, and filled with potential. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt alive, not just existing in the rhythm of work and routine, but truly alive, ready to embrace what life had to offer. The experience of that evening stayed with him, even as the fire dimmed and the stars faded with the coming dawn. He realized that meeting strangers, sharing stories, and opening his heart, even just a little, could create moments of magic. Moments that reminded him that life, no matter how long one is spent alone, still held surprises. Little did Jack know, this night was only the beginning. The connection he felt around the fire, the laughter, and the shared stories would mark the start of a transformation. His life of routine and solitude was about to be touched in ways he had never imagined, all beginning with a chance encounter on the edge of the canyon with a group of traveling Apache women. As night fully settled over the canyon, a gentle hush fell across the land. The wind had softened, and the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the quiet murmur of the stream nearby. Jack Dusty McCall sat closer to the small group of Apache women, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames before him. It was a warmth that reached deeper into the part of him that had been quiet, unused, and almost forgotten over the years. The women moved gracefully around the fire, preparing a simple meal of roasted corn and dried meat. Jack watched them, fascinated not only by their skill but by the way they seemed to move in harmony with one another, each gesture meaningful and natural. There was no rush, no tension, just the calm rhythm of shared work. It reminded Jack of his younger days on the ranch, when he and other cowboys would work together to round up cattle or mend fences, yet even those days had never carried this kind of gentle joy. Ayanna, the woman who had first spoken to him, noticed the way Jack observed everything with quiet admiration. "You have a good eye," she said softly, smiling. "You notice more than most people. Perhaps that is why you understand the land so well." Jack tipped his hat slightly and smiled. "I've spent most of my life out here," he said. "It's hard not to notice." Her smile widened, and for a moment Jack felt a strange sense of recognition, as though she saw more than just the surface of him, as though she could see the solitude he carried like a second skin. He cleared his throat, unsure what to say next, when another of the women, a younger one named Nayeli, began to hum a soft, melodic tune. It was simple, yet beautiful, a song carried through generations. Something inside Jack stirred. He realized he had not heard music like this in years. Real music that told a story without words, that could touch the heart in ways nothing else could. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening intently, feeling the vibrations of the song in his chest. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic, and Jack felt the tension of years of solitude begin to melt away.
Before he knew it, Ayanna extended a hand. "Dance with us," she said gently.
Jack blinked, startled. Dancing had not been part of his life for decades, yet there was something in her eyes that encouraged him to try. He hesitated, but the thought of remaining still while this living story unfolded before him felt wrong. Slowly he stood, allowing Ayanna to guide him toward the small circle formed around the fire. At first, his movements were awkward, stiff from years of not sharing space or rhythm with others, but the women were patient, laughing softly when he stumbled and guiding him with gentle encouragement. As he began to follow their lead, something unexpected happened. He felt free. For the first time in decades, Jack moved without fear of judgment, without the weight of past failures or missed opportunities. His body remembered the rhythm long forgotten, and he began to laugh, the sound mingling with the women's own cheerful voices. The fire flickered and danced, casting shadows that seemed alive, stretching across the rocks and the land. Jack felt as though he were part of a painting, a story unfolding under the stars, with the warmth of human connection surrounding him. He realized that he had spent so much of his life thinking he was content alone, yet the joy he now felt revealed a truth he had long denied. He had missed this, deeply, more than he had allowed himself to admit. After dancing, they sat again by the fire. Jack listened as the women shared more stories of their travels, the people they had met, the traditions they cherished, the challenges they had faced. Each story was full of life, full of movement, and full of resilience. Jack found himself captivated, occasionally adding small anecdotes from his own life on the ranch. The women listened intently, asking questions and laughing at his dry humor, making him feel for the first time in years that he belonged, not as a solitary cowboy, but as a participant in the world of human connection. As the night deepened, Ayanna spoke softly about life, about the importance of moments like this, where strangers could meet, share, and leave the world a little lighter than they found it. "Life is not just about survival," she said. "It is about connection, about sharing laughter and stories, about letting yourself be open to experiences you never expected." Jack nodded, feeling the truth in her words settle deep within him. He had always survived, yes, but he had not truly lived. His days had been filled with work, with routine, with solitude, and while there was safety and comfort in that, it was not enough. He realized now that life had always been waiting for him to take a risk, to step into the unknown, to allow himself to feel fully. The conversation naturally drifted to the past, to memories of family and friends, of love gained and lost. Jack found himself opening up in a way he had not allowed for decades. He spoke of his dreams as a young man, of the woman he had loved and lost, of the life he had imagined and the life that had come instead. The women listened without judgment, without interruption, offering only understanding and compassion. For Jack, this was revolutionary. He was accustomed to hiding his emotions, to solving problems alone, to facing life with stoicism. Yet here he could be simply human, vulnerable, and heard. Hours passed. The fire burned lower, and the stars grew brighter above them, glittering in a way that seemed almost magical. Jack felt a calm he had not known for years, a sense of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The isolation that had weighed on him for decades now seemed distant, replaced by a lightness of spirit, an understanding that connection and joy could arrive unexpectedly, even in the lives of those who thought it was too late. Ayanna noticed his quiet reflection and spoke again. "You have carried solitude for a long time, Jack, but tonight shows that your heart is not closed. You are ready for life to surprise you." He nodded, unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the depth of the experience. He realized that the night had given him more than companionship. It had given him hope, the kind of hope that reaches deep inside and says, "Your life is not finished. Your story is still being written, and it is not too late for joy." Eventually, the women encouraged Jack to rest. They had laid out simple bedrolls nearby, and he accepted gratefully, feeling the exhaustion of emotion, movement, and reflection wash over him. As he lay down looking up at the vast expanse of stars, Jack thought about the events of the evening. He had expected nothing, perhaps even anticipated the dull routine of another quiet night, yet he had received so much more. Laughter, warmth, music, stories, and a spark of life he thought had faded long ago. In the quiet, he reflected on the lessons of the night. Life was unpredictable. Moments of connection could appear when least expected. One could not plan for joy, nor could one anticipate friendship. Sometimes it arrived like a gentle wind, soft but persistent, carrying with it the promise of change. Jack realized that the rigid routines he had clung to were protective, but they had also limited him. Life was calling him to step beyond the familiar, to embrace new experiences, and to allow himself to be vulnerable. As sleep approached, Jack made a silent promise to himself. He would not let this night be an isolated memory. He would carry its lessons into his days, allowing himself to be more open, more engaged, more alive. The spark that had been ignited around the fire would not be extinguished by routine or fear. It was a reminder that life could still be extraordinary, even for a man who had thought he was destined to live alone. Jack drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep under the stars, the firelight casting soft shadows on his resting figure. The night had changed something inside him. He had come seeking nothing, and yet he had received everything he needed in that moment: connection, laughter, understanding, and the gentle realization that he was capable of feeling fully, once again. And though he did not yet know how the coming days would unfold, Jack McCall understood one undeniable truth. Life had a way of surprising those who were willing to step forward, to open their hearts, and to embrace the unknown. The spark that began tonight around the campfire was only the beginning. In that quiet, magical night, surrounded by the laughter and stories of the Apache women, Jack began to see a new path, one that led not away from life, but directly into it. He had thought his story was written in solitude, but the night had reminded him that there were still chapters left to live, still moments of wonder to be experienced, still warmth to be found under the wide, endless sky. The morning sun broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the canyon and bathing the land in warmth. Jack Dusty McCall woke slowly, feeling a sense of calm that had been absent from his life for years. The events of the previous night still lingered in his mind, the laughter, the stories, the songs, and the gentle connection he had felt around the fire. For the first time in decades, he felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with work or routine. He had discovered something far more precious, the reminder that life was not meant to be spent entirely alone. As he rose and stretched, Jack noticed the Apache women moving quietly around the campsite. They were already preparing breakfast, working together with ease and quiet joy. Jack watched them for a moment, feeling a warmth that was more than physical. Their presence had changed something inside him, opening a door he had thought was long closed. He realized that connection, laughter, and shared experiences were not just fleeting pleasures, they were essential parts of life. Ayanna noticed him watching and smiled. "Good morning, Jack," she said. "Did you sleep well?" Jack nodded, tipping his hat. "Better than I have in a long time," he admitted. Thank you for everything last night." She nodded, a gentle understanding in her eyes. "You are welcome. Life has many ways of teaching us. Sometimes it's through solitude, sometimes through surprise encounters. The important thing is to be open to it." Jack felt a lump in his throat. Her words carried a truth he had long ignored. For years he had buried himself in work and routine, convincing himself that solitude was enough, yet last night had shown him otherwise. He realized now that he had been surviving, but not truly living. The women's laughter, their stories, their music, it had awakened something he had thought lost forever. After breakfast, the group began to pack up. Jack offered to help, and they accepted. Together, they moved efficiently, working side by side with a rhythm that reminded him of the old days on the ranch. He marveled at how natural it felt to collaborate, to share responsibilities, and to feel part of something larger than himself. For years, Jack had done everything alone, believing that independence was the measure of strength. Now he understood that strength could also come from trust, from connection, and from allowing oneself to rely on others. As they prepared to depart, Jack realized he did not want this night to end, not the memory, and not the sense of connection it had brought. He spoke carefully, unsure if he was ready to express the depth of his feelings. I don't know if I can explain it," he said. "Last night, it felt like something I've been missing my whole life. I didn't know I could feel this way again." Ayanna looked at him gently. "That is because you have been closed off, Jack. You believed life was over for you in terms of connection, joy, and warmth. But it is never too late. Life can surprise us when we least expect it. You just need to keep your heart open." He realized that the change he had experienced was not fleeting. It was the beginning of a transformation, a shift in how he viewed the world and his place within it. He felt hope stirring inside him, a quiet, persistent hope that he could carry forward into his everyday life. Over the next few days, Jack returned to his routines on the ranch, but everything felt different. The chores that had once felt mundane now seemed infused with purpose. When he tended the cattle, he noticed details he had ignored for years: the way the morning light touched the grass, the gentle sound of hooves on the soil, the peaceful rhythm of life that surrounded him. Even the simple act of repairing fences felt more meaningful, as though he were reconnecting not just with the land but with himself. Jack also found himself reaching out to neighbors and acquaintances in ways he had not done before. A wave of friendly conversation here, a small favor there. He realized how isolated he had been and how much he had missed by keeping to himself. The lessons of the night with the Apache women had stayed with him, reminding him that connection was not only possible but essential. He began to appreciate the small moments of community that he had long overlooked, understanding that life was richer when shared with others. One afternoon, as he worked in the barn, Jack paused and thought about the women. He realized that their visit had changed him in ways he had not anticipated. He no longer feared opening up, no longer felt that vulnerability was a weakness. Instead, he understood that vulnerability was a doorway to growth, to connection, and to joy. He remembered Ayanna's words, "Life can surprise us when we least expect it." He carried those words with him, allowing them to shape his interactions, his perspective, and his actions. He had spent years burying feelings of loneliness, longing, and even regret, believing that acknowledging them would make him weak. But now he saw that recognizing and embracing emotions was a form of strength. He allowed himself to feel gratitude, hope, and even excitement for the future. Emotions he had thought were no longer accessible to him. The spark ignited by the encounter with the Apache women had grown into a steady flame, warming the corners of his heart that had long been cold. As the days turned into weeks, Jack continued to embrace the lessons he had learned. He sought out small adventures, exploring parts of the ranch and surrounding land he had neglected. He invited neighbors over for meals, shared stories around a fire, and even found moments to write down memories and reflections from his life. The routines that had once felt monotonous now held opportunities for connection and discovery. Each day brought new experiences, small joys, and a renewed sense of purpose. Jack also noticed a change in how he viewed the future. Where once he had felt resigned to solitude, he now imagined possibilities. He thought about friendships, shared experiences, and even the idea of love. Not as an immediate expectation, but as a potential, a possibility that life could still bring. This shift in perspective was profound, altering how he approached each day, how he engaged with others, and how he nurtured his own happiness. The transformation was not sudden or dramatic, but subtle and steady. Jack did not suddenly become a different man overnight. Rather, he became a man more in touch with himself, more open to the world, and more aware of the richness that connection could bring. He began to notice the beauty in ordinary moments, The flight of a hawk across the canyon, the gentle sway of trees in the wind. Each observation was a reminder that life was full of wonders, often overlooked when one was lost in isolation. Jack also started to plan small, meaningful changes to his life. He thought about maintaining contact with the Apache women, about continuing to learn from them, and about embracing opportunities for friendship and shared experiences. He understood that transformation required action, not just reflection, and he felt ready to take steps to live a fuller, richer life. In the evenings, he would sometimes sit on his porch looking at the horizon and thinking about the night around the fire. He felt gratitude for the encounter that had shifted his perspective, for the women who had unknowingly helped him rediscover joy, and for the realization that life could still surprise him. The loneliness that had once defined him no longer held the same power. Instead, hope, connection, and possibility filled the space where despair had once lingered. Jack also noticed that his work on the ranch became more fulfilling. He approached each task with renewed energy and mindfulness, seeing the land not as a burden of labor, but as a partner in life. Caring for the cattle, repairing fences, and tending to the property became opportunities to practice patience, gratitude, and presence. Each day became a chance to apply the lessons of the night with the Apache women, to be open, to connect, and to live fully in the moment. As the weeks passed, Jack began to share the story of his encounter with trusted neighbors and friends. He spoke of the warmth, laughter, and music, of the simple yet profound lessons he had learned about openness, connection, and the unexpected joys life could bring. Sharing the story strengthened his sense of belonging, reminded him of the beauty of human experience, and inspired others to embrace their own opportunities for connection and growth. Jack McCall, the middle-aged cowboy who had once believed his life would be defined by solitude, now carried a quiet transformation within him. He was not only living differently, he was thinking differently, feeling differently, and approaching each day with a renewed sense of purpose. The night with the Apache women had sparked a change that would continue to influence his life for years to come, reminding him that no matter one's age or past experiences, life still held possibilities for connection, joy, and discovery. By embracing the lessons of openness, vulnerability, and shared experience, Jack began to understand the true meaning of community, friendship, and even love in its many forms. His days were no longer marked solely by work and routine, but by moments of presence, gratitude, and connection. He had discovered that life's most profound joys were often found in the simplest moments, sharing a meal, listening to a story, laughing with others, or sitting quietly beneath the stars. Jack's transformation was subtle, but undeniable. The man who had once thought he was destined for a lonely life had begun to rebuild himself, piece by piece, guided by the gentle wisdom and companionship of the women he had met. He carried their lessons forward, allowing the spark ignited on that unforgettable night to grow steadily, illuminating his days with warmth, hope, and possibility. And so, Jack McCall's life entered a new chapter, a chapter marked not by isolation and routine, but by openness, reflection, and a growing understanding that life, even for a man long accustomed to solitude, could still offer unexpected wonder, connection, and joy. Jack Dusty McCall had spent years walking a quiet path alone, thinking that solitude was his destiny, but the events of that unforgettable night with the Apache women had changed him in ways he could not have imagined. Life on the ranch continued, as it always had, with cattle to tend, fences to repair, and days that began before the sun rose. Yet everything felt different now. The rhythm of work, once monotonous and solitary, now carried with it a sense of purpose and a new awareness of the beauty that existed in small moments. Jack woke each morning with a lighter heart. He noticed the soft hum of the wind through the sagebrush, the gentle clopping of horses' hooves, and the golden glow of the sun on the hills. These details, which he had once taken for granted, now filled him with gratitude. Even the chores that had once seemed tedious, the mending of fences, the feeding of cattle, the repair of equipment, were no longer merely tasks. They had become opportunities to live fully, to be present, and to appreciate the life that surrounded him. The land that had always been his companion now seemed more alive, more vibrant, reflecting the transformation that had taken place within him. Jack found himself thinking of the Apache women often. Ayana, Nayeli, and the others had left a mark on his heart that was impossible to ignore. They had reminded him of the joy that could come from connection, the warmth that could be found in shared stories and laughter, and the beauty of being open to life's surprises. He felt an urge to see them again, to maintain the bond they had formed in that brief but extraordinary encounter. So he wrote letters, carefully and thoughtfully, sending messages of gratitude and curiosity, eager to continue learning from them and sharing experiences. Days passed and replies arrived. The women wrote of their travels, the places they had visited, and the people they had met. They asked about the ranch, the cattle, and Jack's life since their last meeting. These letters brought excitement and anticipation to Jack's days, something he had not felt in decades. The connection, once sparked around a campfire under the stars, had grown into a meaningful friendship that crossed miles of open land. Through their correspondence, Jack began to understand that connection did not require constant presence. It could flourish through communication, respect, and shared curiosity about life. As the weeks turned into months, Jack's relationships in the local town began to shift as well. He started to engage more with neighbors, offering help when needed and accepting invitations to community events. Jack had always been capable and reliable, but now he was approachable, warm, and genuinely interested in others. The lessons of openness and vulnerability he had learned from the Apache women carried into every interaction. He discovered that people responded positively to his authenticity and kindness, and that friendship could be nurtured even in the simplest gestures: a shared meal, a conversation, or a helping hand. Jack also allowed himself to reflect on his own emotions more deeply. The loneliness that had once defined him no longer felt like a burden. It had been replaced with a nuanced understanding of human experience. He realized that isolation had taught him resilience, self-reliance, and skill, but connection brought richness, warmth, and a sense of belonging. By embracing both solitude and companionship, he had discovered a balance that filled his life with meaning. The Apache women occasionally visited his ranch when their travels brought them nearby. These visits became small celebrations, moments of laughter, shared meals, and storytelling that reminded Jack of the magic that could exist in ordinary life. He introduced them to his animals, showed them the work he was doing on the ranch, and in turn learned about their traditions, their dreams, and their perspectives on life. Each encounter reinforced the lessons he had learned around the campfire, the importance of openness, of connection, and of embracing the unexpected. Through these interactions, Jack also discovered new dimensions of himself. He realized that he had been capable of joy, laughter, and emotional depth all along, but had hidden it under layers of routine and caution. Now he expressed himself freely, sharing stories, singing songs, and even learning a few of the Apache traditions. These moments of cultural exchange deepened his understanding of the world and enriched his life beyond anything he could have imagined when he thought he was destined to live alone. Jack's perspective on love and companionship began to shift as well. He did not rush into romance or expect instant change, but he allowed himself to feel the possibility of meaningful relationships in the future. The experiences with the Apache women showed him that connection could come in many forms, not only romantic love, but also friendship, mentorship, and shared experiences. This understanding freed him from the pressure of seeking a particular outcome, allowing him to enjoy life's moments fully and authentically. The transformation was not only emotional, but practical. Jack became more attentive to his surroundings, more careful with his work, and more intentional in his interactions. He took time to appreciate the small joys: a calf born healthy in the early morning, the first bloom of spring wildflowers, the quiet murmur of a creek running through his property. Each moment became an opportunity to practice gratitude, to savor life, and to embrace the lessons of openness and connection he had learned. Jack also began mentoring younger ranchers and cowboys in the area. He shared his knowledge of the land, the animals, and the ways of the West, but he also taught them about the importance of emotional intelligence, kindness, and connection. His life experience, combined with the lessons learned from his encounter with the Apache women, made him a respected and valued member of the community. Young men and women looked to him not only for guidance in ranch work, but also for wisdom in navigating life's challenges and relationships. As the seasons passed, Jack's sense of fulfillment grew. The isolation that had once defined him was no longer a shadow over his life. Instead, he had cultivated a rich tapestry of relationships, experiences, and moments that brought him joy and meaning. He had learned that life's greatest treasures were not always material or planned, but often unexpected. A chance meeting, a shared meal, a conversation under the stars. The night with the Apache women had been the catalyst for this awakening, reminding him that the world still held wonder, even for someone in the middle of life who thought all opportunities had passed. Jack's story became an example in the community of the power of openness and courage. People admired how he had transformed himself, how he nurtured relationships, and how he remained humble despite the change. He was no longer seen only as a solitary cowboy, but as a man of heart, wisdom, and experience, capable of touching the lives of others while continuing to live fully himself. In quiet moments, Jack reflected on his journey. He thought about the years he had spent alone, the dreams he had once held, and the life he had imagined. He did not regret the solitude entirely. It had shaped him, taught him resilience, and given him a deep appreciation for nature and work. But he also understood that life's richness came from connection, from embracing others, and from daring to step beyond the boundaries of fear and routine. Jack's cabin, once a symbol of isolation, became a hub of warmth and activity. Friends visited, neighbors stopped by for conversation, and letters from the Apache women brought excitement and reflection. Meals were shared, stories were told, and the fire that had once illuminated a single night now symbolized the ongoing light of connection in his life. The land, the animals, and the routines remained, but they were now complemented by the depth of human experience he had welcomed back into his heart. Jack McCall, the cowboy who once believed he would live and die alone, had discovered a profound truth. It is never too late for life to surprise you. The spark ignited on a quiet night with strangers had grown into a steady flame, illuminating every corner of his life. He understood that joy, friendship, and love were not only possible but essential, and that life, no matter how long one had spent in solitude, could still be full of wonder. By the end of the year, Jack had fully embraced this new chapter. He continued his work with the same dedication as before, but now with a heart open to connection, a mind attentive to beauty, and a spirit ready for adventure. The lessons of openness, gratitude, and courage remained with him, guiding his actions and interactions each day. Jack no longer measured his life in years of solitude, but in moments of shared joy, laughter, and understanding. Looking out across the plains from his porch one evening, Jack smiled. The wind rustled gently through the grass, the sun dipped behind distant hills, and the world seemed alive with possibility. He thought of the Apache women, of the night that had changed everything, and of the countless moments of beauty, connection, and learning that had followed. His life was no longer solitary. It was rich, full, and brimming with unexpected gifts. Jack knew that life would continue to bring surprises, some challenging, some joyful, but he felt ready. He had learned to embrace the unknown, to trust in connection, and to open his heart to the possibilities around him. No longer just a man of work and routine, he had become a man of experience, warmth, and presence, carrying within him the lessons that would guide him for the rest of his days. And so, the middle-aged cowboy who had once thought he would die alone now lived fully, with laughter in his heart, friendship around him, and the quiet knowledge that life, no matter one's age, could still bring extraordinary moments. Jack McCall had been changed forever, not by wealth, adventure, or fame, but by connection, kindness, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. The fire that had burned that first magical night continued to glow in his life, a symbol of hope, transformation, and the endless possibilities that awaited him under the wide, endless sky.